Mark wasn't exactly thrilled about being on an alien ship. In fact, he wasn't thrilled about being anywhere near the kind of trouble that would leave him wounded, stuck in a med bay with his leg in a cast. But that's what happened when a routine landing on a strange planet turned into a crash landing. He'd barely survived the encounter with the local species, and now he was stuck in a foreign world, half-conscious and not entirely sure how he'd make it out. When he first woke up, he was groggy, his mind clouded, his body aching. His leg hurt like crazy, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the room, the strange, sterile environment around him. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with an eerie, otherworldly light. It wasn't a human hospital, that was for sure. And neither was the person who walked through the door. She was tall, almost impossibly so, with green skin that shimmered slightly in the light. Her hair was silver, long, and moved as though it were alive, not quite like anything Mark had seen before. Her eyes were a deep, glowing violet that seemed to look right through him. "Hey there," Mark mumbled, his voice rough and tired. "Am I dead?" The alien woman's lips curved into a small, amused smile as she crossed the room toward him. Her movements were graceful, elegant, and oddly comforting. "No, human, you are not dead, but you should be resting." Mark blinked, rubbing his eyes. "Resting? I don't need any more rest. I need a few aspirin and a hot shower." She tilted her head slightly, her violet eyes studying him. "I am Dr. Lyrics. I'm here to help you recover. I'm a healer, not a medicine dispenser, as you might put it." "Doctor, huh?" Mark grinned despite himself, trying to focus. "Not exactly what I expected, but I'll take it." Lyrics reached out, her long fingers gently checking the bandages around his leg. Her touch was surprisingly warm, despite her alien appearance. "You are lucky. You crashed into a dangerous species territory, and yet you survived. Your wounds are not life-threatening, but you will need time to heal." Mark shifted slightly, the ache in his leg reminding him of just how much trouble he'd gotten himself into. "I don't know how I ended up here, but I guess I owe you one. What is this place, exactly? Aliens have hospitals." Lyrics's lips quirked, a slight humor tugging at the corners of her mouth. "It's not exactly a hospital. We have healing chambers. I am the only one who tends to travelers like you. You are lucky, human. Most are left to fend for themselves." "Lucky?" Mark echoed dryly, glancing at his leg. "I'm not sure how lucky I feel right now, Doc." Lyrics's eyes softened as she adjusted the bandages around his wound. "You will heal, but you must rest. I have seen many humans in my time, but none who have quite the courage you do. It's rare." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Courage, huh? I'm pretty sure I was just lucky enough not to get eaten by the locals. I don't think that counts as courage." Lyrics smiled a little wider, her expression genuine. "It counts in my book. Not many would have survived what you did, and certainly not many would have managed to stay alive long enough to reach this place." Mark chuckled, though it was strained. "Yeah, well, I'm stubborn. I don't go down easy." She finished adjusting his bandages and met his eyes with a more serious expression. "That's good. Stubbornness can keep you alive, but you must listen to your body. Your healing process is not just about time, it's about rest. You must trust the process." Mark let out a long breath, settling into the bed as best as he could. "Trust the process, huh? Not my strongest suit, but I'll try." Lyrics nodded and stood up, taking a step back as she gathered her equipment. "I will return to check on you soon, but for now, rest. You will need your strength to heal." As she turned to leave, Mark called out, "Hey, Doc. Thanks. You're not what I expected, but in a good way." Lyrics glanced over her shoulder, her expression softening. "You are welcome, human. Get well soon." Mark watched her leave the room, her presence lingering long after she had vanished. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite place. She was alien, sure, but there was a kindness in her that he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a healer, she was a person. And despite his current situation, despite the mess he was in, Mark couldn't help but feel a strange warmth in his chest as he lay back against the bed. Maybe he hadn't just been saved by an alien doctor. Maybe he was being healed in more ways than one. The days passed slowly for Mark as he recovered in the med bay. His leg, though still aching, was starting to feel better. Dr. Lyrics visited him regularly, checking his progress with gentle hands and a calm demeanor that put him at ease. Despite the alien technology and strange surroundings, he began to look forward to her visits. She was different from anyone he'd ever met, and he found himself captivated by her presence. On the fourth day, Mark was sitting up in bed, trying to stretch his legs a little when Lyrics entered with her usual quiet grace. This time, though, her violet eyes lingered on him with something more, something deeper, than just professional concern. Mark noticed it immediately, his heart skipping a beat. "Feeling better?" Lyrics asked, setting down a small case of medical supplies. Mark grinned, rubbing his leg. "I've got to admit, your alien medicine is working better than I thought. I almost feel human again." She smiled, a small laugh escaping her. "It's not just the medicine. Rest, time, and care go a long way. Your species may be resilient, but even the strongest need to recover." He watched her for a moment, feeling a strange sense of warmth. There was something in the way she spoke, in the way she looked at him, that made him feel important. Not just another patient, not just a random human from Earth, but someone worth her time, her care. "I'm glad you're here, Lyrics," Mark said before he could stop himself, his voice softer than he intended. She looked up from her equipment, meeting his gaze with a mix of surprise and something else, something Mark couldn't quite name. "I'm glad too, Mark," she replied, her tone genuine. "I've treated many travelers, but you are different." Mark raised an eyebrow, trying to hide his smile. "Different, huh? What do you mean?" Lyrics paused, her fingers stilling over the medical supplies. "You're more open than most. You don't hide behind walls, behind fear. Most humans I've encountered put up barriers, whether consciously or not. But your honesty, your straightforwardness, it's refreshing." Mark's heart warmed at her words. "I guess I don't have time for walls. Life's too short, right?" She smiled again, but this time it reached her eyes, and Mark felt like he was seeing her more clearly than ever. There was more to Lyrics than just being a doctor. She was kind, not just because it was her job, but because she wanted to be. For the first time since his crash, Mark felt a deep connection to someone who wasn't from Earth. He had always imagined meeting an alien on his journey, but never in a million years had he thought it would feel like this. There was no fear, no distance. Just two people, connected by shared moments and vulnerability. "Thank you," Mark said, his voice low and sincere. "For everything. You've made this whole thing a lot easier. I thought I'd be all alone here, stuck in some alien hospital, but you've made me feel like I matter." Lyrics's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his good shoulder, a touch so gentle it almost felt like a promise. "You do matter, Mark. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I could help." Mark looked at her hand on his shoulder, then up to her face, meeting her gaze. It felt intimate, not just because of the physical touch, but because of the way she was looking at him. Like he wasn't just a human patient she had to deal with, but someone who mattered to her. "You're not like anyone I've met before," Mark said softly, his voice quiet but steady. "And that's kind of amazing." Lyrics seemed to hesitate, her eyes flicking down to the floor for just a moment. When she looked up again, there was something different in her expression, a vulnerability that she hadn't shown before. "You're different too, Mark," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "You make me feel connected to something I thought I had lost. I've spent so long in this job just focused on healing that I forgot what it felt like to care." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "Lyrics, you do care, I see it. Every time you look at me, every time you help me. You're not just a healer, you're something more." Her breath hitched slightly, and for the first time there was a flicker of something in her eyes that Mark recognized. Longing, hope. Something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. She stepped closer to him, the air between them charged with something undeniable. Mark could feel the heat of her presence, the way his heart raced in her gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was filled with unspoken words, emotions that had been building between them since the first day she treated him. "Mark," Lyrics began, but she didn't finish. Instead, she leaned forward, her hand still on his shoulder, and brushed her lips lightly against his cheek. It was soft, almost hesitant, but it lingered long enough for Mark to feel it deep in his chest. He closed his eyes, the touch sending a warmth spreading through him. When he opened them again, he met her gaze, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "I think," he said quietly, "this is the start of something more than just healing." Lyric smiled, her eyes softening. "I think so too." And as Mark lay back against the pillow, his body still sore from the crash but his heart racing in ways it never had before, he knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, alien and human, two beings connected by more than just circumstance. The days that followed felt like they were slipping into a rhythm. Mark's recovery was progressing, slow but steady. Every visit from Lyrics brought a sense of calm, her presence like a balm for both his physical injuries and his lingering loneliness. He'd gotten used to the way she looked at him, the small gestures that made him feel seen in a way no one had before. With every visit, he found himself looking forward to her gentle touch, the way her fingers would brush his skin as she adjusted his bandages, her voice always kind, always patient. But as much as Mark tried to focus on his recovery, he couldn't ignore the growing tension between them. He felt it every time their eyes met, something unspoken, something more than just the healer-patient dynamic they had. He wasn't sure if it was the loneliness of being so far from Earth, or the vulnerability that came from relying on someone else to take care of him. Either way, he couldn't deny that his feelings for her were growing stronger by the day. One evening, as the soft glow of the artificial sun began to set outside the med bay, Mark found himself staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. His leg was feeling better, but his heart, that was a different story. The way Lyrics had looked at him the last time they spoke, like she wanted to say something but couldn't, lingered in his mind. Suddenly, the door opened, and there she was. Lyrics entered the room, carrying a small tray of supplies. Her silver hair flowed around her shoulders, and her violet eyes locked onto his with that familiar mixture of concern and something else he couldn't quite define. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, her voice soft and gentle. Mark smiled, trying to hide the flutter in his chest. "Better, I think, but I've still got a ways to go." She walked over to his bed, setting the tray down on the table beside him. "That's good to hear. You're healing well. Soon, you'll be able to get out of here and back on your feet." Mark nodded, but there was a hesitation in his voice. "I'm glad to hear that, but I've been thinking a lot. About, well, everything. About us." Lyrics paused, her eyes flicking to him with a mixture of curiosity and something else. "What do you mean?" He shifted on the bed, propping himself up with one elbow. "I mean, I've been here for a while now, and I've spent all this time with you, and I can't help but feel like there's more between us than just healing." Lyrics's face softened, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she walked over to the side of his bed, her movements fluid and graceful. She placed a hand on the edge of the bed, her fingers brushing against the fabric. "Mark, I don't know what to say. You're my patient. I'm here to help you heal, not to create complications." He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Lyrics, I don't want to complicate things. I feel something when I'm around you, something real." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted quietly, looking down at their joined hands. "I've always kept a distance, both emotionally and physically. It's part of my culture, but with you, it's different." Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he gently squeezed her hand. "It's different for me too. You make me feel things I didn't even know I could feel. I don't know what this is, but I know that I don't want it to end when I leave this bed." There was a long pause, the only sound in the room the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Lyrics took a deep breath, finally meeting his eyes. I've spent so much time focused on my duty, on healing others, that I've forgotten how to feel. You make me want to change that. Mark's pulse quickened, and without thinking, he reached up and gently brushed a strand of silver hair away from her face. You don't have to be afraid, Lyrics. I'm not here to pressure you into anything. I want you to know how much I care. For a moment she didn't respond, but her eyes softened. It was as if she was finally allowing herself to feel the truth of his words. Slowly, she leaned in, her face just inches from his. I care about you too, Mark. Before either of them could say more, the door to the med bay slid open with a soft hiss, and a group of medical staff entered, breaking the moment. Mark quickly let go of Lyrics's hand and she stepped back, her face flushed. I, I need to go now, she said, her voice slightly strained. I'll check on you later. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of the moment slip away as the staff moved in, but he didn't care about the interruptions. He knew something had shifted between them, something that couldn't be undone. As Lyrics exited the room, she glanced back at him once, her eyes full of unspoken words. Mark lay back against the bed, his heart still racing, his thoughts a whirlwind. He didn't know where this would lead, but one thing was certain. His feelings for Lyrics were real, and now he had to figure out how to navigate this unexpected connection between them before it was too late. The days blurred together for Mark as his leg continued to heal, but his mind was never far from Lyrics. He couldn't ignore the pull he felt whenever she was near. Her presence, gentle and calm, had become a constant comfort in the chaos of space travel. But more than that, he was drawn to the mystery of her, an alien doctor with a heart that seemed to beat in a way that was entirely different from his own, yet somehow in sync. Each visit from Lyrics left him with a mixture of hope and longing. She was always professional, tending to his wounds with efficiency and skill. But beneath the surface, Mark could sense the quiet tension between them, the unspoken words that neither of them was quite ready to say. One afternoon, as the artificial sun filtered through the medical bay's windows, Lyrics entered, her usual calm demeanor masking the subtle shift in her energy. Mark was propped up on the bed, his leg wrapped in bandages and his eyes trained on the door as she walked in. "Hey, Doc," he said, grinning at her. "You're getting here at the usual time, or am I just a special case today?" Lyrics's lips twitched into a small smile as she set down her medical kit. "You are always a special case, Mark." Her voice was soft, but there was an underlying warmth in it that sent a ripple through his chest. "How are you feeling today?" Mark shrugged, trying to look nonchalant, though his heart was already racing from the simple act of seeing her. "Better. The pain's almost gone and I'm starting to get back to my old self, or whatever counts for that on an alien ship." Lyrics walked over to him, her steps light, almost graceful. She adjusted the bandages around his leg, her fingers gentle as she worked. Mark found himself watching her, taking in the way her silver hair moved with each motion, the way her violet eyes focused with such concentration. "You're healing well," she said, glancing up at him. "You might be walking again soon, but you still need rest. Don't push yourself." He chuckled softly. "Don't worry, Doc, I'm not rushing anywhere, unless you count rushing to get off this bed and see the rest of the ship." She raised an eyebrow, her fingers pausing as they worked. "Is that so? You've already seen a bit of it, haven't you?" Mark grinned. "Oh, I've seen a lot of spaceships, but none with a nurse like you. I think that makes yours a lot more interesting." Lyrics's gaze flickered for a moment, and Mark swore he saw a flash of something softer in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a professional smile. "I'm not sure I'm that interesting, human, but if you keep up the compliments I might start thinking otherwise." Mark couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. "Well, I do have a reputation for making things interesting. Just wait till I'm fully recovered. You won't be able to get rid of me." Lyrics's smile deepened, though she said nothing. She finished checking his leg, standing up and stepping back with a final glance at him. "I'll leave you to rest now. You need more time to heal." Mark's grin faded just slightly as he watched her prepare to leave. He hated the idea of her walking out of the room without saying more. Something had shifted between them, and he was starting to wonder if it was more than just the way she tended to his injuries. He needed to know if she felt it, too. Lyrics, he called softly, not sure if he should even speak his thoughts out loud, but it was too late. His heart had already started beating faster, his emotions louder than his better judgment. I know you're just doing your job, but I need to say this. I'm not just grateful for the healing. You've done something for me that no one else has. You made me feel seen. She stopped at the door, her back to him for a moment. The quiet in the room stretched between them like a thin thread, delicate and fragile. Finally, Lyrics turned, her face unreadable. Her violet eyes met his with a softness that made Mark's heart stutter. "You are seen, Mark," she said quietly, "but I don't know if what you're feeling is real. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this." Mark's heart sank for a moment, but he refused to let the words crush him. He'd never been one to give up easily. "I don't expect you to have the answers right now," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just here. Whatever this is, whatever we are, I'm not going anywhere. I don't need an answer. I just need you to know that I'm not leaving." Lyrics's gaze softened even more, and Mark could see the struggle in her eyes. "I don't know how to navigate this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I do know this. I've never met anyone like you, Mark. You make me want to believe in things I thought I'd lost." Mark smiled, his heart swelling at her words. He'd never thought of himself as a saver of anyone, but here, in this strange new world with an alien woman who had never been like anyone he knew, it felt like the beginning of something incredible, something real. "You don't have to figure it out right now," he said softly. "Just take it one step at a time with me. That's all I'm asking." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The ship's hum was the only sound between them, but it felt like the universe itself was waiting with bated breath. Lyrics finally stepped closer to him, her hand brushing his. "One step," she whispered. Mark felt the warmth of her hand against his and smiled. Maybe they didn't have the answers yet, but they would find their way together, step by step. The next few days felt like a turning point. Mark could tell something had shifted between him and Lyrics. It was in the way she lingered a little longer than usual, the way she smiled more easily around him, the way her eyes softened when they locked onto each other. She was still professional, of course, but there was a warmth in her gaze that spoke volumes. And Mark could feel it. Every time she touched his arm or adjusted his bandages, his heart raced. It wasn't just the healing touch anymore. It was her. But as much as Mark wanted to push forward, he knew that Lyrics was still holding back. She hadn't said anything more about the conversation they'd had in the med bay, and despite the growing connection between them, there was an invisible wall Lyrics hadn't let him cross yet. He could feel it. The uncertainty. The hesitation. One evening, when Lyrics came in to check on him, Mark decided it was time to change things up. He'd spent the last few days recovering, his leg getting stronger with each passing moment, but it wasn't just his body that needed attention anymore. It was his heart, and if he was going to stand any chance with her, he needed to be brave. Lyrics entered the room as graceful as ever, her eyes flicking over his form. She smiled, setting her medical kit down with a quiet thud. "How's the leg today?" "Better," Mark said with a smile. "But I think you're going to have to deal with me being on my feet soon, Doc. I'm getting restless." She laughed softly, her voice light and melodic. "Restlessness is a good sign. It means your body is healing, though you still need to take it slow." Mark tilted his head slightly, leaning forward as if deciding something in his mind. "Slow, huh? Well, I'll take it slow if you promise me something." Lyrics raised an eyebrow. "What is it you want me to promise, human?" He grinned, feeling the familiar rush of excitement in his chest. "Promise me you'll stop treating me like just a patient." Her smile faltered for a split second, and Mark could see the walls start to rise again. "I don't understand what you mean." He pushed himself to sit up a little more, his heart pounding. "I mean, stop keeping things so. professional. You and I both know there's more between us. There's a connection. And I'm not talking about your medical expertise." Lyrix's eyes flickered with something Mark couldn't quite read, but it wasn't anger or dismissal. It was something quieter, more vulnerable. She took a small step back, as if creating space between them, but her voice didn't betray her uncertainty. "Mark, I don't know how to handle this. I've always been focused on healing others, but I've never been taught how to feel like this." Mark's heart clenched at her words. "You don't need to be taught how to feel, Lyrix. You just need to feel. It's okay to let go sometimes. It's okay to admit that you care about someone." She stayed silent for a moment, her gaze flicking to the floor as if she were searching for something inside herself. Mark watched her, his heart in his throat. He could tell she was fighting something, fighting her own feelings, her own fears. "Do you know how difficult it is for me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was taught that emotions were distractions, that care for others could make us weak. I've always kept a distance, kept my heart closed." Mark's pulse raced as he slowly reached out, gently lifting her chin to meet his eyes. "But I'm not asking you to be weak. I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me in, even if it's just for a moment. Because I want you to be with me, not as my healer, but as someone I care about." Lyrix's lips parted, her eyes searching his face, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she seemed to soften. The walls were starting to crack. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mark," she said, her voice trembling with something deep, something Mark could feel echoing in his chest. "I've never felt like this with anyone before." He smiled gently, brushing a strand of her silver hair behind her ear. "You don't have to be ready. I'll be here with you no matter what. We can take it slow. Just don't shut me out." Lyrix's breath caught, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then slowly she reached for him. Her hand hesitated for just a second before it gently cupped his face. Mark's heart skipped a beat, and he knew this was the moment that would change everything. "You make it hard to hold back," she whispered, her voice full of tenderness. "Maybe I don't want to hold back anymore." And with that she leaned in, her lips meeting his with a softness that took Mark by surprise. It wasn't a passionate kiss, not at first, but it was full of something more, a promise, a connection, a shared understanding that they had finally crossed the line from patient and healer to something more. Mark closed his eyes, deepening the kiss just slightly, feeling the heat of her against him, the tenderness in her touch. When they finally pulled away, Mark's heart was racing, his breath shallow. Lyrix's face was flushed, and there was a small, uncertain smile on her lips. "I think I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice still full of wonder, "to take that step." Mark grinned, his heart soaring. "Then let's take it together." And in that moment, Mark knew that no matter what challenges came their way, no matter how different their worlds were, they had found something real, something worth fighting for. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Mark and Lyrix. They were both trying to navigate the new connection between them, unsure of where it would lead, but undeniably drawn to each other. Mark could tell that Lyrix was still holding back, though. She had always been professional, calm, and in control, traits that Mark admired. But now, after their kiss, there was something different. It wasn't just the physical closeness between them, but something deeper that neither of them had fully explored yet. Every time Lyrix entered the room, Mark's heart would flutter in his chest. There was no denying it now. He was falling for her. And while he wanted to be patient, he couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could continue dancing around the obvious feelings that were starting to develop between them. It was late one evening when Mark was sitting up in his bed, reading a data pad on his latest mission. The soft hum of the ship was the only sound, the artificial stars outside twinkling in the blackness of space. Lyrix had just finished her rounds and was preparing to leave. Mark glanced up at her, his eyes locking onto hers, and suddenly everything felt charged. "Lyrix," he called out, his voice a little more serious than usual. "Can we talk for a minute?" She paused, her hand on the door, and turned back to face him. There was a slight hesitation in her eyes, but she nodded. "Of course, Mark. What's on your mind?" He set the data pad aside, his gaze focused on her. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about this, about what we're doing." Lyric stepped into the room and moved closer, sitting at the edge of his bed. "What do you mean?" Mark took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "I know we've both been cautious. You've been keeping your distance, and I get it. I understand you've had your reasons for that, but—" He paused, his heart racing as he struggled to find the right words. "I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want us to be this thing that's just hanging in the air. I want to know where we stand. I want to be with you, Lyrics. I want to explore what this connection is between us." Lyrics's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she didn't speak, her gaze flicking to the floor, as if trying to process what Mark had just said. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between her natural inclination to keep a distance and the undeniable pull between them. "Mark," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you're right. I've been keeping my distance. It's not because I don't want this. It's because I've never known what to do with it. I've spent so long focusing on healing others, on being distant, that us feels like a foreign concept to me." Mark reached out, gently taking her hand. "It's okay to be unsure. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but what we do have is each other, and I believe that's enough to figure it out." Lyrics looked up at him then, her violet eyes filled with something Mark hadn't seen before: hope. She squeezed his hand, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I don't know what the future holds, Mark, but I want to find out with you." Mark's heart leapt in his chest. She was finally saying it, the words he had been waiting to hear. "Then let's take it one step at a time together. No pressure, just us. We'll figure it out." She nodded, her smile growing more confident now. "Together," she agreed. The air in the room felt lighter, the tension that had once hung between them dissolving like a fog. Mark felt a surge of relief, the weight on his chest lifting. They didn't need to rush. They didn't need to have everything figured out. All they needed was each other, and for the first time, Mark felt like they were on the same page. Lyric stood up, brushing a lock of silver hair out of her face. "I'll give you time to rest, Mark, but I'll be back tomorrow." "Of course," Mark said, his smile playful, "but you're not allowed to leave without one thing." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Mark leaned back against his pillows, his voice light but sincere. "A promise that you'll be here when I wake up." Lyrics's smile softened, and she leaned in close, her breath warm against his cheek. "I promise," she whispered, before gently pressing her lips to his forehead. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to Mark. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her touch linger even after she pulled away. As she turned to leave, Mark couldn't help but smile to himself. Everything had changed. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the universe was on his side. The following days were filled with small moments that brought them closer. They shared stories about their respective worlds, Mark talking about Earth and the chaotic, beautiful mess that was human life, while Lyric spoke of her people, their ways of healing, and their ancient traditions. Each conversation felt like they were unwrapping layers of each other, peeling back the walls they had built, piece by piece. One evening, as they sat together watching the stars outside, Mark realized that everything had changed. What started as an unexpected healing session had turned into something deeper, something real. "I think I'm starting to fall for you, Lyrics," Mark said suddenly, his voice full of honesty. Lyrics turned to him, her violet eyes sparkling in the dim light. "I think I'm falling for you too, Mark." And as the stars twinkled above them, the world outside felt so far away. In that moment there was only them, and that was all that mattered. The days on the ship had begun to feel more like home, with Mark and Lyrics's bond growing stronger with each passing moment. What had started as a simple patient-healer relationship had blossomed into something far deeper, something neither of them had expected, but both of them were now willing to explore. The tension that had once hung between them had melted away, leaving room for something real, something raw, and something beautiful. Mark was starting to get back to his usual self. His leg was almost fully healed, and he could walk without the crutches that had been his constant companion for the last few weeks. He felt more alive, more energetic, but it wasn't just his body that had healed, it was his heart. He felt whole again, and he owed it all to lyrics. One afternoon, after his daily checkup, he sat in the med bay, waiting for Lyrics to finish with her rounds. He had been thinking about this moment for a while now. He had to tell her how he felt, how much she had come to mean to him. He had known it for days, but today there was a quiet certainty in his chest. It was time. When Lyrics finally entered, she seemed as calm and composed as ever. Her violet eyes met his, and she smiled warmly, her usual gentle presence filling the room. "How are you feeling today, Mark?" she asked, her voice soft but full of concern. "I'm feeling better than ever," he said with a grin, leaning back against the bed. "I think it's safe to say I'm on the mend." Lyrics raised an eyebrow, walking over to him. "Good to hear. You'll be walking around before you know it." Mark chuckled, but his smile faded as he looked at her. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to tell her. "Lyrics, there's something I need to say, something I've been thinking about for a while." She paused, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it, Mark?" He took a deep breath, his hands nervously smoothing the blanket in his lap. "You've changed everything for me. When I crashed on the ship, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I thought I'd be stuck here alone, just another casualty of space. But you," he stopped, looking directly into her eyes, his voice steady now. "You've made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. You've made me feel like I matter, like I'm not just another human wandering through space." Lyrics's expression softened, and for the first time, Mark saw her eyes glisten with something deeper. She didn't speak right away, but she stepped closer to him, her presence a comfort that made his heart beat faster. "I care about you, Mark," she said quietly, "more than I ever thought possible." The words, simple yet profound, made Mark's chest swell. "I care about you too, Lyrics, more than you know." She smiled, a soft, shy smile, as if she were letting herself believe the truth for the first time. She reached out and gently touched his hand, her cool fingers sending a wave of warmth through his body. "You've given me something I never expected. A chance to feel again, to let go of everything I've kept buried. You've made me realize that maybe I can have more than just my duties." Mark squeezed her hand, his heart pounding in his chest. "You don't have to be just your duties, Lyrics. You're so much more than that. You've shown me what it means to truly care, and I want to be here for you, for us. No more holding back. No more pretending." Lyrics's breath caught, and for a moment the air between them felt heavy with unspoken words. She looked down at their joined hands, her fingers trembling slightly before she looked up at him again. "I'm scared, Mark," she admitted, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. "Scared that I'll mess this up, scared that I'm not ready for this kind of connection." Mark smiled, gently lifting her chin so that she was looking at him. "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too, but we don't have to have everything figured out. We just have to be here, together." Her eyes searched his face for a moment before she nodded, a small but genuine smile spreading across her lips. "Together," she echoed, her voice full of warmth. Mark couldn't help but lean in closer, his heart racing as he brushed his lips against hers. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but a soft, sweet promise. A promise that no matter where the future took them, they would face it side by side. They both knew there were challenges ahead, Lyrics's past, Mark's life as a human among alien species. But in that moment, they didn't care about any of that. They only cared about the feeling between them, the connection that had started as something fragile, but was now something strong and undeniable. When they pulled away, Lyrics's hand still rested in his, and she smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling with the same hope that filled his chest. "We're doing this," she whispered. Mark nodded, his heart full of emotion. "Yeah, we are, and I couldn't be more ready." They stayed like that for a while, just the two of them, sitting together in the quiet of the med bay, surrounded by the stars. The universe felt vast and unknown, but with Lyrics by his side, Mark knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be.